Howdy folks, Rudros here, and it is time for Opus 22. Do you have hope? Is it hidden? Well, we're going to see if we can find it. Now, if you've watched any of my set reviews since Opus 14, normally I am joined by Mr. Jared Wallace, all the way from Japan, Mr. Eureka himself. Unfortunately, just due to some scheduling issues, he's just not available right now, wasn't going to work out. However, I don't have to do this alone. My good friend Ghoul02 Daniel has decided to step in, help me take a break from his own set reviews to join me today. So Daniel, thank you very much for joining me. Welcome. How are you, sir?
Doing all right. You got the next best thing, I guess. I always like listening to Jared. Honestly, I'm almost disappointed I don't get to listen to these while I'm at work now. That's actually kind of like a bit disappointing for me, but no, I'm taking a break from my own Final Fantasy VII Rebirth playthrough to go through these, and I love looking at new cards and trying to evaluate them, so this should be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Yeah, so we'll see. Maybe we'll get Jared back for the next one. We'll just have to see how time will tell for that, but I am very grateful to have Daniel here. So, quick perspective, I mainly grade cards from a standard constructed perspective. I don't tend to look at draft much, so there could be some cards that are great in draft here. I know there are, but I just tend not to talk about that, just so you know what kind of perspective you're getting from me. And in the effort of saving time, I might skip past a couple of the ones I kind of see as chaff. Daniel, how are you evaluating these?
Pretty much the same. I can't give much perspective on like L3 or L6. I do draft and especially play like pre-release limited, so like cards that are especially good there, I'll definitely try to call out where I can, particularly in like the common rare range. But for the most part, my knowledge is in standard constructed as well, so which, to be fair, is what most people play here, so It works out.
And as of the recording of this, I believe Octagon just got updated, so for both of us, this will mainly be speculation. You know, we haven't really gotten a chance to play hands-on with these, but that's the fun. Let's see what we think of them, which ones change later. So, all right, I almost said Jared, are you ready? Daniel, are you ready to jump into fire?
I'm ready as I'll ever be.
All right, well, let's burn it up. And this first card is very familiar to me. Wow, this is the first time I've gotten the first card of the set spoiler, Mr. Orin. How exciting.
You got the main page spoiler even.
I did, yeah. I've kind of forgotten about that till you showed it to me. So obviously I've had a lot of time to look over this card and think over it because it was my spoiler, and I love Orin as a character, love 10 as a game. I mean, at 2-cost backup, nothing to sneeze at, and it has back attack, so if nothing else, you could just steal essentially going first from your opponent, and it has an incredibly relevant effect too, that just, hey, something's about to get nuked by summons or abilities, just surprise. Actually, Orin says no, it isn't. Someone pointed out, oddly enough, it actually blocks your opponent's own Magissa ping too, which is kind of funny. I don't know how much that would ever come up, but it's just kind of cute it does that. If you're still playing Guardians, not that that deck's been seen in a minute, I don't think it replaces the Water Orin because that card is very good, but it is a buddy target. So if you're playing anything with the Riku can, pay for it if you're not predominantly in fire. Maybe it's a fire win card. So it's all around a very good card. Obviously, I'm very biased towards it, but I would be shocked if this didn't see some kind of play.
Yeah, the other thing, I mean, you mentioned it, but back attack on a backup. This is now the 4th color that has this, where it's back attack on a 2CP backup, because there's Earth with Carbuncle, Lightning with Kane, Ice with Juggler, and now Fire with Orin. And I think every single one of these cards has been playable, even the vanilla. Carbuncle has no text on it and has seen constructed play. This is extremely relevant text. This is essentially a 2CP summon that's a protection spell that just happens to develop a backup. It's insanely powerful. The only downside is how many of this do you actually run? Say you're in mono fire, do you run 1 of it, 2 of it, because it can be a little awkward to actually play, but I would be shocked if this didn't find its way into a couple topping lists if they're on a fire focus.
Yeah, don't let me down, Orin. Next, we have the Red Mage.
One more thing on Orin.
Sure.
The buddy in Fire Wind was especially bad because the target you could get for Fire Wind was Lulu.
Oh, yeah.
And Lulu was the worst possible name you could have for a category 10 backup and anything wind. So this fixes that problem as well. That's not a contested name for Firewind at all.
Excellent. Well, I expect great things from him then. Next, we have a Red Mage. For a standard unit, it's actually not terrible. Most of these kind of have their second action ability is geared towards mono, so to speak, that, they want you to play the same type, even though it's just 1 fire card, so you could probably play it in duel. I don't know how much constructed play. It gives me vibes of the old, Yatsuyu Fire used to have these backups that you could target something, say they can't block. But 5 or less covers a whole range of targets, so I don't see why you wouldn't at least try one in fire. Again, I just don't know where the game is at that an effect like this is irrelevant, but I don't mind the card at all.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, this entire cycle, with the exception of I think the wind one, has like really interesting things going for it. I mean, disabling a blocker isn't like the biggest deal, but like it will come up and it will matter, especially if there's like an aggro fire deck. And fire is going to want to run a lot of backups this set, I think, with Montleonis. There's just a lot of like weird utility. First strike is being a lot more common as well, which makes it hard to like play offensive. This can just turn off Warrior of Light as a blocker, which means you can actually get in for damage in an aggro deck, which could just matter.
True.
And then the action ability, like effectively 4 CP for 8k damage, is about on rate. And if you can cash a backup out to do something relevant, you feel pretty good about it, honestly. This is like, I don't know how much play it'll see, but it's not bad.
Yeah. Agreed. All right. Well, I got very excited when I saw Ayame here because I was like, oh, they're going to give Samurais more support. Unfortunately, this ended up being the only card Samurais got. And I mean, I like that this name is relevant again because Ayame had, I think like it was an Opus 5 or 6 card, 7 maybe, that the last one it got. And it's fine. I mean, you play any samurai and it buffs it to 9k and then it can shoot for 7. Like, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it, but I don't know. I don't think this single card's suddenly going to make samurai see a bunch of play again.
It probably doesn't. I don't dislike this kind of support. I mean, it's very careful, but I mean, it's a name the deck hasn't really cared about for a long time.
Yeah.
There's also just even an argument, maybe like Mono Fire likes it. I mean, you can run in Mono Fire very comfortably up to 12 Samurai backups without really feeling bad about it. Cyan is a fantastic board wipe. He's a Samurai. Even if you don't want to go all in on the Tenzen stuff, and even there, I think like if you run Mono Samurai backups plus Cyan plus like an Ayame, Tenzen doesn't seem like a bad idea at that point. Like the card is not aged that badly, you know. So for 2 CP, it kind of creates this damned if you do, damned if you don't situation where there's this big brave blocker that your opponent probably really wants to remove, but they don't really have a nice way of doing it. It's very hard to trade up or like a 2 CP forward like this. So she seems pretty solid. I just don't know where she ends up going, other than like if there is a samurai package that ends up in Mono Fire this set.
Yeah. Point. Well, another card, one of our first full arts. This is Angeal, and obviously soldier support. Not that soldiers are a huge class. I looked through them a little bit before we came on, and the one that stood out to me the most is the Zac, that he does more damage to for all the soldiers you have, and it's cool. You can immediately put him right into the field. There's some Clouds, there's some Sephiroths. Like Zac is the one that really stood out as, oh, that's probably what you're going for. Maybe you want to dip back to Opus 3, get out Genesis. I don't know. So yeah, a cool card, clearly good for that job support. What will that job look like? That I don't know. So this is one of those cards where it's like, hey, it's good for the thing it supports. I don't know how good the thing it supports is. What do you think?
Are you ready for a take here?
Hit me with it.
This is one of the best backups they've ever printed in the game.
Wow. Do tell.
Well, there's 2 main targets for this. You mentioned the first one, which is the Opus 20 Zac, which I've said for a long time is a card that's been slept on. That card does a lot. This both turns him on, which makes him a threat because he deals damage based on the number of soldiers you control. And that's not soldier forwards. It's soldiers, period. Yeah. So he's going to attack and do 12k on attack. Your opponent has to get rid of that, because if they don't, he's going to tear them apart. But if they do, you just float into anything. This could be Aerith, that can be Sephiroth, that could be Genesis. And you can go into Aerith, get the Zac back, and play the Zac back down. I think that card, and also that card's got a great special.
Yeah. That
would also get buffed by this. Now that special is doing 9k to all your opponents.
Which is huge.
Yeah. There's one other target that you missed.
Is it Light Cloud?
No.
Oh, who is it?
Pod Cloud.
Oh, is he a soldier? Oh, wow, I thought he was like a mercenary or something. Okay, yeah.
Nope. So this allows you to play Pod Cloud even in Mono Fire.
Wow.
That is more relevant than it ever has been this time.
Oh, yeah. Forgive me, folks. I didn't realize he was a soldier.
So this plays Pod Cloud straight from the deck for 2 CP on a 3 CP backup.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
And I think Pod Cloud is one of those just kill on sight forwards.
Yeah, absolutely.
So anything that like forces your opponent to react, like what? Like Pod Cloud is like in the same realm as like Une almost, as like a card you just cannot let stick around. Une, Refia, like anything that does that is incredibly powerful. So I have very, very high expectations for Angel.
Excellent. Well, maybe he really will take off then. Yeah, good insight with the Cloud Pod. All right, next we have Ignacio, the first Sworn 6 of the Palladia. Haven't seen these guys since Opus 10. Yeah, I mean, so clearly you want to play him in mono fire because all the milled cards have to be fire. I guess would it have been too much to just pay 5 to deal 9k on entry? Like, did it even have to mill? I don't know, that part just kind of seems tacked on to me, that like, I feel like we're in the day and age paying 5 to remove something isn't some insane value. So he's fine. Is mono fire good? Maybe that'll depend on Montleonis a lot. I don't know, but yeah, this is one of those weird cards where it's like, technically there's nothing wrong with it, but it doesn't excite me. How do you feel about it?
I just don't know why you'd run this over Tidus. Like, if you're willing to mill 3, you're willing to mill 5, right? Like, you're never playing this in like a Fire X deck and saying, well, if I'm only running a couple of non-fire cards, it might hit, but Tidus milling 5, you'll never get it.
Yeah.
So you have like, Tidus has haste. I think you do a slightly less damage, but it's like,
it's 8 versus 9.
There's benefits. Yeah. The self-mill is actually like a bonus, outside of like the fact it makes you play it in a mono fire deck. Like, self-mill is card advantage as long as you don't deck out. But what are you doing this in that like Tidus isn't enough for you? And like, I thought, like, when I first saw what they were doing with the Sworn 6, like, oh, this will cost, 4 or less, so you could, like, get it with Reagan.
Yeah.
But that doesn't seem like that's clearly not the intent in any way with this card, because these both cost too much and can't be played in a multicolor deck. So I just think this one's, like, I don't think it's a bad card, but I don't see a world where it sees play.
Yeah, that's fair.
I guess, like, the only other advantage is, like, he costs 5 and gets haste off of Montleonis, but
yeah,
there's better target. There has to be a better target than this for that. So
let's hope so. Speaking of seeing play, so Knights is a deck that I've just always kind of had a soft spot for. It's never really exploded, and is this the card to do it? I don't know. So it's got an EX burst, and getting a Knight back from the break zone is really nice. And clearly, if it can stick around, like in theory, this is everything you would want, right? It's an on-entry effect, immediate value, and then as it sticks around, you'll get more and more value out of it. Now, a single Knight entering to shoot for 5k, that's not huge. You probably want to get, 10. I think the card is cool, and it's not like there was a premier Garland. Sometimes the Opus 14 Legend, people wouldn't even run that because it just falls to certain cards. So, like, this is clearly the Garland you're going to want to use in Knights. Will it be enough? Maybe it will. Maybe that 5k you can sneak up and you can go, okay, Lastwell Charlotte, boom, boom, and I double, I got 2 dull freezes, so maybe it is. Maybe this is just one of those sparks it needs, and it's going to rocket it forward. I really hope so. I don't know why I feel hesitant about it. I think just because Knights in general have yet to prove themselves, but it did get a lot of cards this set, so I have my fingers crossed for Garland because I want to see this succeed.
There's potentially. I mean, it's clearly a decent card. I don't think there's any arguing there, and there's actually been an issue because Gawain has been a pretty decent card, just with no fire targets it's really wanted. I mean, the Flare Garland was good for about an Opus and a half, and then after that, it just kind of fell off the face of the earth as a card you just really didn't have time for. And even when it resolved, I used to say Flare was one of the specials that says you win the game, and that's not true anymore. So then the question then becomes, what is this doing? And honestly, the biggest thing I think of is, like, Agrias, as great as that card is, 7k just does not quite do enough. But if you tack an extra 5k onto that, we're kind of cooking a little bit. Beatrix is still a card archetype that has proven to be very powerful, as shown by Fang in 13. I don't know that this Garland is enough by itself, but it's not a bad card.
Yeah. Good insight. This next card, Carla, is kind of funny. I thought this was a backup till just today when the full set got released and I really looked at it. I was like, oh, it's a forward. Because as a backup, I was like, oh, that's interesting. You pay 3, but then you have these abilities. But yeah, as a forward, it's very slow and doesn't do anything, and then it can't attack. So
it's unfortunate. Mono Fire is playing the Opus 5 Carla backup because it's an Agito Cadet that you can search with Miyu. So they are like dying to replace Mutsuki and Carla, and they just printed new versions of both of them that are not better than the old versions, which is hilarious. That deck is playing vanillas in those slots, and they can't print better ones. Which
Right.
is just, it's unfortunate.
Swing
We
and a
don't need to
miss.
dwell on it too much.
Yeah, swing and a miss. On to Clavat. So there is one of these in every color, so we're just going to talk about all of them right now. Yeah, so it's your standard, you'd call this a scry effect in Magic, where as it enters, you just look at the top card of your deck, and you can either keep it there or put it on the bottom. They're multi-playable. About as good a value as you can get off of a 1 CP backup. Would this replace things like Weaver and those other backups that became free as you got bigger backups? I don't know. Some of these decks have really tight backup slots as is, so as I pass it to Daniel, because I don't know the answer myself, what colors do you think will actually use this? All of them, none of them? Because I'm not sure what colors actually want these.
Well, the first thing that really pops out, all of them are Crystal Chronicles, so they're all fetchable with Northstalin. That's really nice. That gives a lot of them utility in places they might not have otherwise. And I mean, the effect is just generally pretty decent. I mean, the floor on a 1 CP standard unit backup is pretty low. You can do just about anything there.
Yeah.
And as much as it feels absolutely incredible to like slap a Weaver down when you have, the 3 lightning backups, just go boop, 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 and slap them down.
Mm-hmm.
Only saving 1 CP relative to this for the awkwardness of, I don't want to cast this until I get 3 backups.
Yeah.
These don't have that issue at all. And there is an added benefit now to doing them that's not just, well, you can cycle them away for 1 CP later on in the game. I never was a big fan of the cycle ones.
Yeah, same.
Like, they were fine, but I always, felt like I could just get better value out of backups elsewhere. But looking at the top card of your deck, putting it on the bottom is not bad in a lot of decks, especially, I could see Mono Wind not hating it just because you want to draw specific cards at specific times. You can maybe, I'm on full backups, I don't need another one, or I want to put a Luso on the bottom so I'm not drawing it at the wrong time.
Yeah.
Opening myself up to Misdragon and losing every Luso I have in the deck. They're just good. There's just no other way to put it. So, I always say that a standard unit 2 CP backup has a chance to be played. A standard unit 1 CP backup is even better. So
yeah. Fair enough. Well, speaking of just good, another Ash at Home card. Not quite as bad as a previous Ash at Home card. So this is Jekt. Is a Guardian. You want to play him in Mono Fire because he can become completely free, which is awesome. You don't even have to pay a single card for him. Just put him down for free. And then he has essentially a fight effect. Now, you'll have to clarify for me. Will this go through protection like Rydia's protection, Yuzuki's protection?
it should.
It should. Okay, and we can always clarify that later because, man, I wish they would come up with a keyword for this so we just know, okay, it does that. But it's a big 9K that that if a 9K for free that should kill most anything on entry. That sounds awesome. It's going to be, I think, a staple in Mono Fire. Again, how relevant will Mono Fire be? I don't know, but Jekt is going to do his best to help it out. Seems like a great card there.
I mean, it's just fantastic. There's no two ways about it. This card could have said reduced by 1 for every fire backup you control and still would be very good alongside Rain.
Yeah.
The fact that it says character means it works with Goblin as well.
Oh, yeah.
You can go Goblin, 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 and then all of a sudden now your Jekt is reduced by 3. And you're just paying your first 3 CP for the Jekt into your Goblins, which is just wildly good. This card's very, very strong.
Excellent. And now our first legend of the set. This is Selfie. Category 8 got a lot of love this set, and it is probably the, whatever you want to call it, category archetype. It's the idea that I'm the most excited to try out of this set, just because it got so much support. So surely it's finally good. Selfie, obviously, search for any 8 forward on entry. Pretty standard. And then she can immediately, assuming you play another one, give it haste, brave, and 1,000 power. Huge if anything has an on-attack trigger, such as Irvine or Cypher, or I think, was it Adia? No, there's another one I think that has an on-attack, but whoever you end up...
The light squall, the fire squall is fantastic with
That's true.
The old, the double, the 4K cleave.
The old Opus 13 Renoa, too, if you're on damage 5, and she can immediately attack and dull the entire board. That's kind of cool. Clearly surely there's going to be good value here. Maybe it's a hair expensive because she has to search it, and then you have to play it as well, and you can just give it the free effect. But yeah, if 8's going to be relevant in Fire, I would be amazed if this card didn't see play, because it seems quite strong.
You pretty much hit the nail on the head. To me, 8 this set reminds me of 13 after the 13 starter, where there's a lot of really, really good cards that all do the same thing, and I have no idea what the right combination of cards is to make this actually a good playable archetype. spitballing some stuff off the top of my head, this pairs very well with the new Squall as well. You know, the Selfie can get the new Squall. Squall can then play Renoa. Renoa can flicker the Selfie. Both the Squall and the Renoa have haste. It's 2 points of damage. And a search for whatever forward with Selfie you want once the Selfie gets flickered off of the old flicker Renoa. That seems really powerful to me. Going like backup into Selfie into Light Squall and freezing 2 forwards or backup seems pretty decent.
Yeah.
This card scares me just because I see the words haste on a card and I go, that probably means it fits into an aggro shell, and goodness knows we have enough of those already. But
and you know someone is slamming this out turn 1 and then immediately playing
absolutely.
whatever.
So the card's very strong. The biggest issue really is what's the reason you're in fire. Maybe you don't even need to be because of the lightning backup, the Sid, but there's no searcher for the Sid, so then you have like the weird awkwardness of like you have to draw the Sid and then get it into play or draw 2 Selfies. It's probably a good thing it doesn't have EX burst, but it would make it a lot easier to just throw it in if it's like, well, at least then if it goes to damage, I get the search anyway.
Right.
But I'm kind of glad it doesn't because the card doesn't need it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think 8 will make at least some waves this set. The question will just be what combination. All right. After Selfie, we have Warrior. This card's chaff. I have nothing to say about it.
Yeah. Some of these cycle are interesting. This one is not.
Yeah. Then we have Foulander. So they went back to this old Opus 9 idea of monsters where they're only monsters on your turn. Inherently, I don't think that's going to be very relevant these days. A lot of the strength of the current monsters is that you can make them forwards when you want to. So them being forced to be forwards on your turn, I just don't think is nearly as strong. And I mean, I'll talk about them individually, but like none of these have really great effects. This just, it deals 3k, like, okay, on damage 3, it deals 5, and then if you block it, I guess that's another 4 at 9. I don't know. It just seemed, I just can't see this seeing any play.
I think the cycle generally is very good.
That's surprising.
I think I'm a lot higher on these. Okay, I'm going to want you to close your eyes for a second.
Okay, I'm closing my eyes.
I want you to picture a forward that disappears during the end phase, and then has an effect once per turn that can be very obnoxious to remove, but also be very, very potent when it comes in. What are you picturing?
Kadaj.
These all seem kind of similar to that, potentially, except instead of costing 4 and being dark, this is a 1 CP fire forward.
That's interesting. Yeah, but those old monsters didn't see play either, though, and they are...
These are a lot better than those are.
Yeah, they are.
The later ones. And Foulander has a couple other things. It's Category 7, so you can pod cloud this away for a 2 CP if there's anything that's relevant there.
True.
Your opponent really isn't... If they have 1 forward, even if they have like a 3 CP forward, they don't want to block this. You know, it's doing 3k on attack plus that, and then if you get to damage 3, a 5k ping on attack is very decent for a card your opponent can't interact with on their turn. And it's a 1 CP monster. The opportunity cost of playing this is very low. You can realm this out of the deck if you just want a monster that can attack. I don't think it's the best target for that. There's another one we can get to later, but I think this cycle generally is very slept on because I read these as Kadages with different effects.
Interesting. I'm definitely not viewing them that way, so I hope I'm wrong and that they do see some play, but I'm going to put my stamp on I don't think these are going to see play camp.
I don't think they all will. I think this one probably won't just because there's better things to be doing if you want a 1 CP monster in fire. We'll get to one that I think will be very scary.
Fair enough. Next, we have Machina, who, for some reason, must always have a downside on his cards. He's just a 1-cost backup, assuming you don't control any forwards, and then later you can spend essentially 2 CP to hit something for 7. Yeah, it's nice to have another fire backup specifically for cadets. Not that he has to go into cadets, but they were so starved for that name, too. And none of the Machinas are very good, so he doesn't really clash with any of them. Yeah, he's fine. I like him. I am just amused by that first line. Like, did he need that? Couldn't he have just costed 1? Or even
kind of
2?
like the Machina, like loner thing that they've gone for with them. Because like I think like he had like a hero back in like Opus 16 that like he cost 5, but he cost only 2 if you didn't have any other forwards. I don't know. I kind of like the flavor of that. I mean, if you have 1 forward, he's a 2 CP backup with a pretty decent effect and a relevant job.
True.
You know, like, or if you happen to be behind on board state, or if you're like early on in the game, you can play him for 1. I actually think that's a pretty cool way to balance a backup. I like the card design behind this. You know, I know it's funny to say, oh, it has a downside. Well, the downside is that like it's too good otherwise. It'd be a 1 CP class hero cadet backup probably.
I guess so. I do like this art a lot, and I'm a sucker for like cloaks and capes, so I think he looks very like Doctor
really
Strange-esque. It's good. All right, next we have a summon I was very excited to see again, Belias the Gigas. I love the Opus 2 Belias, the 2-cost EX Burst one. One of my favorite fire summons. I'm kind of sad it hasn't seen much play. How good is this one? So this is kind of a cycle of summons where they all have this effect of if you play them exclusively with backup CP, you always get to draw a card, so they essentially all become 2 cheaper. I don't know how relevant that will be. I guess it depends how quickly you can get to your backups. It might make some of your other turns awkward that you have to pay with backups. I don't know. Regardless, is this even better than the old one? It doesn't have an EX burst, and I see what the envisioning, right? It's clearly meant to be a 2-for-1. You attack in with something, okay, I'm going to block it with my 9k, and you surprise Belias, 3k first strike, also shoot your 7k, and I just 2-for-1 you it. And then I draw a card. If that scenario lines up, that's amazing. That's going to feel so good. Will that scenario line up? Is this better than a card like Bahamut or something that just says, no, just remove it outright? I don't know. I'm hoping it feels better in testing than I look reading it, because I can't see that scenario really playing out in practice. So I hope I'm wrong, because I've always liked this summon, and I would like to see this succeed.
Honestly, the like refund on playing backups is a cool design. I like the angle they're going for there. I don't know how relevant it'll end up being, because a lot of times if you're doing that, you're right, you're probably giving up CP somewhere else, which usually means you're discarding to play something else. But remember that old Opus 10 Ifrit that still sees some play every now and then?
I do.
Is this not just a straight upgrade if you're trying to protect one thing and kill one thing?
Yeah, I guess kind of in a way. Although it involves your opponent blocking, whereas that one could just...
It just involves anything that you want to get your
forward that's true. If it's 7k, yeah, as long as they've got a 7k.
Yeah, like really all you're looking for here is some kind of damage-based removal or something that cares about the power of your forward, which could be a blocking forward, it could be a Bahamut, it could be anything like that. And a forward on their side of the field you just incidentally can kill.
True.
And that feels really good. You're 2-for-1ing your opponent because you're blanking their removal spell and you're killing something they control. Everything else on the card seems pretty decent. If you can get the draw, that's probably just gravy at that point, right? That said, 3k is a lot less than it's been in a long time.
Yeah.
Or 7k.
Yeah, 7.
Like the damage number on this is not very high, so it's almost like a specific metagame call, but I don't hate this card in concept. And like I said, that Ifrit still has seen some amount of play to this day. So it might be a side grade to that. It might be like for a very specific reason you played this over that or that over this, depending on what your numbers are lining up as. But it's an interesting option. I like it.
Fair enough. Next, we have Meath. So I hate this card, and let's clarify that. Me hating it does not mean it's a bad card, but this isn't a Travis card. If anyone knows me, I don't want to break my backups. Like, if I'm breaking a backup, I better be winning the game or something. I want to get them nice and comfy, and I'm there. So this one, I'm removing a backup out from play. You do get to draw 2 cards, but, like, I mean, is that worth it? Because now you just lost a resource. Like, again, I guess if it seals out the game, maybe that's good. I think the other Meaths are all pretty solid as well. So, yeah, if Daniel likes this, you got to sell me on it because, again, this just isn't my type of card.
This is free. It's 2 CP back. It's a 2 CP card that draws you 2 cards. We talked about how Miyune was so good because she was free. This does the same thing. Right? You're losing a backup, but you're drawing a card to replace the backup. The backup, you could draw a 2 CP backup and play that backup.
In theory, yes. This won't line up for me that way. I know that.
But, like, okay, here's another alternative solution. If you have 4 backups and this is your 5th backup, you feel pretty good. Like, you don't always need to go to 5 backups every game. Another option, if this is a FFCC backup, you could remove your Northstalin to play the Northstalin and get another backup to play.
That's true. Yeah. That's a good line. I like that.
There's just a lot of weird utility with this card. I think this card's really good. It's funny, Meath has 3 cards, and all of them are insanely good.
Somebody loves Meath.
Someone at Hobby Japan loves Crystal Chronicles is what they really love.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much love that series gets in these. So, no, it's a good card. Just full stop.
All right. Well, I hope I'm proven wrong with that because yeah. But like I said, I didn't necessarily say it was bad. It's just not me. This isn't. I don't want to be destroying my own backups. But you made a good case for it. Can you make a good case, however, for Minwu? Not the water sage that we're all used to. This is the Brave Exvius version. So this is a pretty neat effect that you could choose a card in your break zone and then you could cast it anytime you normally could cast it. It is limited to your turn only because man, wouldn't it be cool to like just Amaterasu? However, here's the big problem. You can only do this if your hand is empty, which again means you have to have backups. How else are you paying for that card then that you're wanting to use? The action ability is clearly potent, like 10k just to your opponent's entire board. That's huge. Obviously, it costs 3 cards from hand. Clearly, that's meant to feed into the first effect that, you've got 3 cards in hand, you discard them, and then your opponent's board dies, and then you pull some back from the break zone and you cast off your backups. But it's also still a card that doesn't technically do anything on entry, and so even if you're getting like a Jin, a 2-cost monster, you have to play it, then have an empty hand, use the effect, then have the thing to use off the backups. Like, it's a cool idea. I just I can't see this actually working out much in practice. What about you?
She's a decent one of in a lot of decks. Any mono fire deck, I mean, I know that like we talk a lot about like, forward that doesn't do anything on entry. She is going to say, "Hey, answer me. You got to do something. I'm gonna do the 10k cleave, and you can't do anything about it." Like they want to get her off the field. I like how her action ability kind of feeds her first ability because like it can be awkward to draw 2 cards for your turn and then empty your hand and still have the ability to cast cards even from your break zone.
Mm-hmm.
So that like there's really neat synergy there potentially. Or like if you have 5 backups, you top deck her. Pitch the card from hand, tap a backup, play her. You can play any 4 costs from your break zone. There's a lot of neat stuff she does with summons. She's kind of like a pseudo man in black.
Yeah.
Where she casts the summon, then it goes right back to the break zone after she casts it. That's pretty neat. Montleonis can revive her, give her haste for her action ability, and then she can replay the backup if you have like a 2CP free cast backup. You can just say, I want to play that for my break zone. Oh, it's free. Cool. Here we go. There's a lot of like really interesting potential for her as like a 1 of or a 2 of in a lot of decks, I think.
In my experience, having no hand always leads to death, but I hope you are right because I would love to see people pull out some really creative plays with this.
She also cost 3, which in Fire is always a thing.
Yeah, that's true.
You can play her with Halfstar, you can play her with Warrior of Light, Megissa. It's a Megissa target that threatens your opponent saying, hey, do something or I'm going to wipe your field and win the game next turn.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So, no, there's just a lot going here. So
keep an eye on Minwu. Next, we have Lilith, which if it weren't a job knight, I would just go right past it because it's just a very generic effect. But it is a knight, and it's a uniquely named knight, not one we have before. So I guess unless you're just desperate for crystals, I don't see it seeing play outside of that. But if you're doing fire knights, as you mentioned earlier, Gawain didn't have a lot of targets. It's another fire target for him.
It's cool with Glaciella as well. This is the first Brave Exvius character with a special since Glaciella.
Oh yeah, it is. Wow.
And being able to spend a crystal for 7k as opposed to a crystal in 2CP for infinite damage. There are times where you just need 7 and you don't need to pay the extra 2.
True.
Do I think that's going to be enough for her to see play? Probably not. But, I mean, Gao saw play in water crystals for a while just as a 2CP4 that generated a crystal. You can do worse, but I don't expect to see the inside of many sleeves.
Yeah. Well, we have another Brave Exvius as our dual gunner Luartha, perhaps her name is. On damage 3, I like this card quite a bit, especially if you have a crystal in the tank that you can immediately give her haste. Kind of gives me Opus 13 Rain vibes, where she comes in, hits something for 5, can immediately attack, boom, hits it for another 5, which is really good, especially when you only paid 1 for it. Outside of damage 3, I don't like her as much. Really good against weak-bodied threats, so a Laswell, Charlotte Pre-3, maybe twins that haven't fully powered up yet. So if they have tiny stuff, really good. But beyond that, I don't know. Would I slot this? I'll try it. I don't know. See, crystals, it's still, I'm just bleh on the whole crystal thing personally. But if you're doing crystals, I think you might give this a shot.
She seems perfectly reasonable. I don't know what it is with the low rarity Brave Exvius on Fire lately between this and... what's her name last set?
The Leftia?
Leftia.
Yeah, and she is a good partner for her since she'll buff it by 2,000, which is really nice.
Fire tends to be one of the elements that is better at generating crystals, just thanks to how good Cyan and the Samurais are at actually generating them.
Yeah.
So it's pretty easy. A 1 CP forward, you know, she kind of does what she does pretty easily. I'm not super worried about that. So I think the card seems okay. I don't know where she really sees play or how much. I feel like in Mono Fire, she's going to be competing with something like Ilua as well.
Mm-hmm.
As like a 1 CP forward that just like gets to do everything you want once you're set up anyway. Maybe this doesn't go there, but then like the backup generated or crystals are generated using backups normally. I guess Cyan and Fire, but like even there, you're not using Cyan usually without a bunch of backups. So, she's fine. She definitely could slot in and do okay. I don't know if she'll ever be optimal.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, we burnt the candle at both ends in fire, so let's cool down a little bit. We'll move into ice. As a matter of fact, we'll just bomb our way into ice with this ice bomb. I like the art on this card. It's just kind of a cool little monster. I don't care for the card at all. Like if I'm running, there's already good ice monsters I want to run, such as Biblos, Scale Toad. What's the other one? Sometimes YTK3. Like on damage 3, I like it a lot better because a dull freeze on attack and you can split it up, which is really nice. But just a single free, I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm not seeing it, but Daniel's smiling, so maybe he loves this card. And again, I don't really like most of these monsters.
Insane.
You think it's insane? How?
I think this is one of the best monsters in the set.
All right, let's hear it.
This is a realm target that just permanently locks a forward.
Yeah, if it's dull.
Yeah. Are they not going to have dull forwards on their field?
I mean, if they see it sitting there knowing it might free, maybe. I mean, it's a 3K, though. They can step anything in front of this.
I think this card is wild. It's a 1 CP forward that can become a monster that locks forwards down. If it gets to damage 3, it also dulls the forward into it. I think this card is wildly good.
Really?
For a 1 CP
You'd
monster.
get this over Evray, over, even the fire monster we just saw?
You can't always get Evray.
True.
Sometimes it's just already in play.
I
think there's an argument for Realm being a water ice deck where you, instead of like, right now it's like water wind.
Mm-hmm.
And in that situation, like, sure, you can get Flan, but like, Flan can't kill your opponent.
Yeah.
This can kill the opponent. Like, and again, this is a 1 CP Kadaj. It's not there on your opponent's turn. On your turn, it dulls a forward that was already dull when it attacks. I think it's a very specific deck that will want this. But I don't think it's a bad card. I think this card is... if this card gets in and attacks one time for a 1 CP, or for 1 CP as a point of damage and locks down a Warrior of Light for a turn, you feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, for sure.
And again, it's so hard for your opponents to interact with. It gets the monsters on the field. You up your character count. You up your monster count for Gao. It's just good.
Somebody out there, show me the sauce with the ice bomb. Prove Daniel right, because I would love to be surprised and see it do well. All right. Next we have Valade. I'm not 100% sure how you say his name. A green mage. He's pretty interesting. I definitely was like, oh, that's interesting when I first saw him. First thing I thought of is ice fire. I mean, there's other combinations you could do. You could break out your old Cactars, put them in ice wind. Granted, there's probably better things you could be doing in ice wind, but yeah, ice fire is the first thing I thought of. I like the ability. I like that it basically says, hey, no matter how small your ping damage is, turn it into a kill. That's really cool. Granted, you do have to pay 1 for it every time, so maybe that will add up. Ice Fire hasn't really been a thing, but man, this kind of makes me want to... It's a card that makes me want to build around it, which is always exciting because not a lot of cards do that. So I'm hoping he's good because I love the ability, and I'm going to be very disappointed if he ends up being not worth it.
Yeah, it's a really cool concept. I don't know how good it ends up being. It reminds me a lot of Palom in a really bad way, unfortunately, where it's like, Palom was okay, but with his sister, he was broken.
Yeah.
This, to me, reminds me a lot of that, where it's like, well, what are we pairing this with? And Palom's actually, hilariously enough, a great target to pair with. It is a zero-cost action ability that does, a small ping. But part of Palom's utility ended up being that his action ability was free, and this action ability does cost the 1.
Yeah.
So then it's like, well, clearly that would be okay, but historically, Ice Fire has been a very aggressive deck. Gets maybe 1 backup, 2 backups down, and then just kind of tries to kill the opponent. You can't really do that if you're having to feed 1 into Valade every turn, most likely. So I think the card's very interesting. It's very potent. Like, being able to say any damage kills. There's a lot of also just like small cleave you could run in, in fire or wind especially. What plays this? I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know either. Someone show us the sauce. You won't need to do that for our next card, though. Emina. Oh, Daniel. So, of course, when I saw the other Ice Legend this set, and I was so prepared to come on here with Jared and be like, they keep doing this concept if they want these Ice backups, like Kefka and Camlanot from Opus 14 and the Crystal Exarch. I was like, but there's not an Ice backup searcher, so what does it matter? I don't have to say that anymore. And they made it worth the wait, because this isn't just your Nordstalin where it's like, hey, go get another backup. Let's just get a character of 2 or less. It can get monsters, can get Biblos, can get Lastwell. Like, I mean, just, hey, finally, Ice has its not only a backup searcher, and then some. Like, I mean, just, I can't say enough good things about the card. Like, it has to be one of the best cards in the set, right?
I can't believe this card got printed. They really put that on the card and said, yeah, ship it. And that's not to say Ice has needed a backup searcher. And I've like speculated like, oh, what could it possibly be? Well, Ice has a like mini standard unit theme sometimes. Maybe a searcher for Arcanist would be cool, right? Like that card sees a lot of play, would feed into that. Maybe we could do that. Or, I don't know. We're printing Kurasame. Kurasame wants backups. Emina and what's his name? The guy that makes you discard on entry for both players.
Not Kurasame. You just said that one. Kazusa? Is that
Kazusa? Yeah. Like they tend to all get paired together. Emina was paired with both of those. Maybe it's a searcher for that, which still would see play in Ice. Kazusa has 2 backups that are both relevant. Like you could play either of those and feel pretty decent about it. You could have done that. You could have restricted it saying just backups. This gets everything.
Yeah.
Like, why? I like good backups, but I can't believe this gets the class Moogle to fix for wind randomly. If you want to play Vayne with Theodore and not invest into Ice or like wind at all, you can do that. You can get Don Corneo in an aggro deck. Like, okay. We went from nothing to everything.
Okay.
This is like one of the rare cards that's on par with like Sarah and Nordstalin for like sheer number of things it can do for the game.
Mm-hmm.
I'm struggling to think of like another backup on that level. Like Fire's best comparison is freaking Miyu.
Yeah.
Just wild stuff. Wow.
Can't wait to run it against you, and I know you'll be looking forward to that. Next we have...
Oh, we get Unalesca too?
Oh yeah, Unalesca. Oh my god, how did I even overlook that? That's like one of the big ones. I can't wait. I cannot wait to run more discard Ice against you. I'm sure you're going to love that. So, keeping with the theme, next we have Quistis. This one is interesting. I kind of... Maybe it would have been too strong if it counted like overall 8 characters, kind of like the Squall we'll see coming up does. Because it specifically counts 8 forwards, I don't... like... You'll probably always get 2 off of this. I don't know how realistically you'll get 3. I kind of just need to see the 8 package in practice. But if you're getting 2, I mean, that probably feels pretty good. A 3 cost, Dull Freeze 2 characters, so it can be
just
there.
Dulls them if you don't have the 3. You gotta get
you're right. You're right. You have to okay, so then you really want the 3. Thank you. I'm glad you pointed that out. Yeah, because the Dull isn't... I mean, if you're going for lethal, it's good, but... yeah, I don't know. Like, and the backup Quistis is pretty solid as is if you're doing Fire Ice, or maybe you're doing Ice Lightning, so I don't know. I don't hate this one. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but now that you pointed that out, you really do want this to be the 3rd card so that you want to get the freeze as well. So yeah, I'm hoping for her, but I actually wouldn't be surprised if maybe she gets swapped out for another one.
It's weird because like the backup is great.
Mm-hmm.
Like reveal the top 4 cards of your deck, add an Ice card from among them to your hand, and then like on damage 5 you get back an 8 character if you just like happen to not draw her before then. But this is a 2 card with Selfie.
Yeah,
you can go Selfie, get Squall. Squall places for free. Dull Freeze 3 things, just lock your opponent out of the game while threatening to do a crap load of damage. Selfie then says one of them attacked, so they've eaten a point of damage. their whole field is probably dull frozen, and then they got to deal with what you're doing. Are you going to do it again next turn? Because the Squall's going to play Renoa, and then Renoa's going to flicker the Quistis, and you're going to do it again. So,
Yeah.
I think the card is like it's decent if a little specific. It's just like I said, it really feels like that 13 problem of like all these cards do interesting, powerful things, but what gets sacrificed to the backup gods? What gets what's the actual combination of like 2 forwards or 3 forwards that you really want to be seeing that wins you the game? And
Yeah.
for 13, it ended up being Hope Vanille. What is it for 8? Is it just? It could very easily be Selfie Quistis, and Selfie gets Squall play Quistis.
Yeah, maybe.
I have no idea.
We'll have to wait and see on this one. So next we have a Bard. When I first read this, I just blew past it because I saw 2 cost or less. What a restriction, blah, blah, blah. It's just chaff. But I actually really started thinking about it. And, forwards have gotten cheaper, and there's a lot of relevant targets that not only does this hit, Ice can have a problem with. So, for example, the first thing that came to mind was Rydia. A lot of times when Rydia players are playing against Ice, they won't even ever attack with her because they know unless she's dull, there's nothing really the Ice players can do. Well, this now says, all right, I'm going to force your Rydia to be dull. Now all that stuff that says break a dull forward, I can finally hit her with. Works on the twins, works on the multi-element Zidane, like, there's a lot of stuff it could hit. It can be searched out by Emina, and then in a pinch, so let's say you've dulled them on their turn and it comes back to your turn, it reactivates. Now you can use its second effect to break that forward. So, yeah, the more I thought about this card, the more I was like, I think this could have a lot of uses, unless like the meta changes and it goes like really high expensive cards, but this doesn't seem like a bad one of to have, maybe even 2.
It doesn't break itself.
Yeah.
Like that very easily could have said dull, choose a forward of cost 2 or less, dull it. Or dull and break. But the fact it doesn't means it's repeatable. So if your opponent has an 8 million power Porum on their side of the field you just can't get over, well, now you can. Porum's probably got other issues if you're at that point anyway,
Yeah.
but like it makes lethal pushes so much easier. Your opponent animates a blue worm to try to like block your last point of damage in an aggro deck. No, they didn't. that blue worm's now sideways. He's not blocking anymore.
Yeah.
Your opponent has a zombie they made unbreakable with Mira. Ice doesn't have. I mean, Ice has a lot of ways to dull stuff, but this is a 1 CP dull spell for that zombie that now is unbreakable.
Mm-hmm.
So now that's not stopping you from doing anything. Like, it's repeatable and pretty decent. Like, in an aggro deck, if you want to push for lethal, 1 less blocker, no matter how small the blocker is, matters.
Yeah. It's true.
Think about times that like an aggro deck gets the opponent to damage 6, and that last blocker keeps them alive, and then they draw the Shantota the next turn.
Yeah.
So, it's just okay. Is it going to see play? I don't know. Probably not, but it could.
I'll try to make it work, see if I can. Just like our legend, this is Kurasame. And again, I wasn't over the moon about this card when I first saw it, just because I didn't know Emina existed. Well, Emina exists now. So his special is fine, doesn't require dull target, so that's nice. But the most interesting thing is obviously what everyone thought of is, hey, if you play this off of 5 ice backups, you can make your opponent discard 5 cards from hand. Now, I think for the discard, you definitely want to try to get 3 or more, because if you're just getting 2, he's basically just like a Sephiroth. Maybe that's nothing to sneeze at. And then if you have 2 ice backups, it means you can only tap 1 and you had to pitch 3 cards for him. But the dull freeze on the characters, for me, 3 is the magic number. If I'm paying 7 for a dull freeze on 2, I don't think that feels very good. If I'm getting a dull freeze on 3, that starts to feel better. Anything above that is just pie in the sky gravy train. I mean, if you can actually rip 5 cards out of someone's hand with this thing, that's going to be nuts. I will be surprised if that lines up very often. Like, I assume either they'll have less cards than that, or I don't know, maybe it'll still take you a while to get to 5 ice backups. So he's a cool card. Maybe he'll be incredibly oppressive. I don't really see that happening. But yeah, he's very interesting and hopefully a very good payoff if you can get to 5 ice backups. Tell me how much you hate this card.
Why? They printed a card that said discard 5, and that wasn't enough. I mean, like, to be fair, like, by the time, like, you're right. By the time he says discard 5, he more realistically says discard 2, discard 3 if you're in a deck. But like, why? No, I mean, there's a lot going for this card. Obviously, if your opponent junks their hand, then just dull freezing all 5 of their backups. Also turn skips them, which probably keeps the cards in hand, so now your discard payoff again. The special is very good. Fun fact, there's a Kurasame with an EX burst that searches Emina.
That's true.
I don't think it's unrealistic to run, like, that special is just pretty good. You could run 3 of that other Kurasame just to, like, if it goes to damage, you get the Emina, you feel pretty good about that. You're going to be running 3 of her anyway, so she's never a dead Surge. Even if you drew her turn 1 and played her, she's still 2 CP and getting her out of the deck. Yeah, no, this card just is very good across the board. It blows my mind that they thought, you know what Ice needs? It needs more cards that discard.
More discard.
It's just...
Someone was like, you know what the problem with Theodore is? He was too slow to come in. They're like, no, he didn't discard enough cards. Print more.
Let's fix both of those issues on the same thing.
Yeah.
It's theoretically possible to get a discard 5 on turn 2 going second, by the way, with this thing.
Is it really? Explain. Give me the sauce.
It's like, I mean, you have to have like a 4 card open. So,
sure.
You know, super pie in the sky, but it's like, you can go back attack a juggler.
Okay.
Then you go Emina, Summoner, Armorer, Kurasame.
That's pretty, yeah, okay.
This is Magical Christmas Land, but like, just think how legendary it will be when you pull that off.
Somebody do that on stream. I want to see it happens. All right.
So yeah, no, it's I don't know. Usually it's probably going to read more like discard 3, and it's going to be an upgrade on Sephiroth probably regardless, just given that it doesn't die to something like Amaterasu.
Yeah.
So you're developing the body, and the special gives it threat presence even while on board, but your opponent doesn't want to kill it because if they kill it, they're going to just, I'll do it again.
Yeah.
You know, once they're down on a low hand size, you could play a Shantoto, get back a Kurasame for a special, then he also like becomes a removal spell at that point. Like, he's just good.
Yeah.
The only thing is, you can only play him in mono ice, so he's like the old, is this on the level of Ash? And discard 5 is pretty close to power reduction.
Yeah, well, luckily he can't really be played in Leo at least, so there's a small reprieve for that. Yeah, I'm not sure if this version of Ice will be better than the like discard aggro we saw last set, but hey, I'm going to test and find out.
I'll take it over that, I guess. Anything but Rufus Rock.
Right? But will you take Cloud of Darkness? Man, I don't know what it is about Cloud of Darkness and Ice cards. She just doesn't seem to get a whole lot of great stuff. This one is just, I don't know, like, they got to have 2 or less, and then they get to choose what they put into the break zone, which is obviously great if they only have 1 target, but I'm not feeling this one.
I mean, it's a common. It is interesting that Cloud of Darkness keeps kind of breaking the Ice, like, color pie.
Yeah.
I think like every single Cloud of Darkness ends up breaking Ice on their color pie. Like the last one broke a monster, which Ice literally can't do.
Yeah.
This one is a very water-ish effect. And so was her mannequin. It was also like the Famfrit effect as well, which is very water. So that's like neat. It's kind of cool to see. It's not good, but it's cool.
Not good, you say? Well, let me give you some more of that. This is Seymour. I think I like audibly balked when I saw this. What? It costs 6. It's 7k power, so it can die to Amaterasu. It does have EX burst. That's probably its one saving grace. And then it's just break a dull forward, which, I mean, Ice has had so many of these effects. I mean, there's an old card in Opus 10 called Cilia, which does that and makes them discard. Like, I don't know, this card just seems wildly out of touch. Maybe they thought they overdid it with, like, Emina, Kurasame. They had to pull it back, but this seems very overcosted for its effect, which Ice has so many of.
It's a common. The only other like small thing, you could technically fetch it with Rydia. So like in the off chance that you've got the Unalesca out already and you want to get some kind of action off of Rydia, you could search this in like Ice Earth, but that's really not even worth considering. You would just search the Unalesca and get a Mist Dragon and be happier.
Yep, very true. Next we have Shiva. Man, I love this effect. I don't know how good it's going to be. Ice has been longing for a consistent playable summon. I don't think they got it with this. It's a really cool idea, just this pure board blink. But as I was thinking about it, I'm just trying to, what is the situation I want this in? Is it when there's an enemy Porum on the field and I'm trying to get my Rufus Rugagine down so that it can't blank them, but then do I even have the CP to cast this? Like, I don't know. And it does blink backups too, and it blinks monsters. It basically says no to monsters, and maybe that alone is worth it because Ice has kind of struggled with monsters. Like you said, it didn't really have much break. Maybe for monsters alone, it will do it. I want this to be good, but I've just been so let down by so many Ice summons. I can very much see trying this out and just being like, it just never came up. So what do you think?
There's a lot going for this. First of all, it's very funny if your opponent is on Chaos or Cosmos.
Yeah.
Because they lose the ability that says you can control them and another light card, so it'll forcibly break both of them, at which point this card becomes wildly overpowered. More realistically, it doesn't do that at all. But one thing that Ice has going for it right now is the Waft Terra, which basically says, Dull Frieza forward, draw a card, and search any Shiva that doesn't cost 4.
True.
You could run this at 1, and if it comes up where it's good in a matchup, you just slap the Terra down, get this, do it, and then kind of go to town. Ice could struggle with cards like the Tidus from Opus 16 that...
True, yeah.
Like, a lot of like situations like that could be very difficult. Like I said, if Chaos plus a Dark forward or Cosmos with a Light forward become a thing, it's hilarious.
Maybe Une, Warrior of Light, Rosa, all those like activation shenanigans. Maybe Rydia. I don't know.
Like, getting Rydia off the field, I think Rydia is going to be hurting this set in general. So,
yeah.
But, like, Ice doesn't have that help. And, I mean, being able to cycle, 1 CP for this effect is not bad either, potentially. If you're just trying to, like, dig for more action, too.
Yeah.
There's a world where, like, Terra is, like, a 2 CP 8K that, like, kind of cycles into 2 cards in your deck, right?
Yeah.
At that point. So, it's pretty decent overall. Not much more to say about it.
But what do you
how much play does it see? Like, it's going to be metagame call.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess we'll see. What do you think of Lady Cisne here? I don't act. This is what I'm so confused about this card. I just don't know what to think of it because I can see the potential. Someone talked about again, potentially if you did this with like Reno turn 1, give himself haste attack, he brings out Rude, she attack, like, yeah, you can kill someone in like 2 turns. The Cisne backup is really good too though, so if you're doing Ice Lightning, maybe you want President Shinra to search that still. So I don't think this card is bad, and it's also in Turks, and I don't know, like your version of Wind Lightning Turks is probably still my favorite. So it's just one of those cards that, like, does this do more for Turks than it wasn't doing already, and it conflicts with what I thought was a really nice backup. So yeah, I don't know. I just don't really know what to think of this one.
This is one we'll have to play with a little bit. It's a little sad that this card came this late. I've always said that, like, the starter deck Turks had a lot of potential for a long time and were really hurting on names. Like, I was playing Bartz as like the 4th best Turk when I was doing that deck or whatever, and this easily would have slotted in over the Cisne we had at the time. That Cisne was never good in Turks. She's only really been playable in Chaos Arc piles. But the problem is that style of Final Fantasy really hasn't been a thing for a long time. The whole critical mass, get 4 forwards of the same job to win the game.
Yeah.
Like, that's not been what the game plan has been. The game plan has really been, 2 forwards is like, that's your archetypal play now. So this thing doesn't fit that mold. Now, granted, she's okay as just like, you play the new Ice, Reno, you attack, and then she's just like a double attack for Reno at that point, and then like Rude can protect her because she is like only a 6K. But like, man, if she does work with those old Lightning ones, they fix so many of her issues.
Yeah.
They give her Brave, which is hilarious.
Yeah.
Then she doesn't dull. She just gets to attack over and over again.
Right.
Yeah. And then she gets to block. They give her First Strike. They give her a ton of power. Like, there's a lot of potential if you can stick the old Reno and the old Rude together with her on the field. But how realistic are we doing that? Are we ramping? I mean, Ice Lightning has a lot of good ramp. You don't need to run President Shinra for Cisne. You can run Reeve, Kate Sith, Kalia Cheval, Tono. Heck, there's another one, isn't there? That's Ice Lightning backup engine that I'm forgetting. Like, there's so many ways of fixing that.
Restrictor, Weiss, yeah, all that stuff.
Yeah, Restrictor, Weiss, Narrow. There's so many engines that you don't need the President Shinra Cisne combo.
Yeah.
So maybe I'd have to play with it.
Someone will like OTK me with this set. I'm very confident. So All right. Next, we'll move on to some gorgeous Matsuda art. This is Jill Nabat. I looked up the job Psycoms, and the only ones that really stood out to me were, of course, the 2 new ones that came out, and the old Yagrosh, if you are playing Ice Water, which has never really been a successful combination. It clearly fits there. I do like the new Rigdia. I don't 100% remember what he does off the top of my head, but I thought he was worth searching off of this if you are doing Ice Lightning. Yeah, I mean, she's fine. Hopefully we'll only get better in the future if they ever get more Psycom targets. That's not a job they print much for. So, yeah, that's kind of all I feel about her. Is she's fine.
Yeah, there's other, like, relevant stuff with her. She's a 13 forward that searches a 13 forward.
True.
Which is a thing. You could very easily see this as just a 1 CP, 7k for category 13. If you're in, like, Fire Ice or Ice Lightning or just whatever the pile ends up being at that point.
Yeah.
Even if you just pitch the extra copy of Jill, to play your Lightning, that's pretty decent.
Yeah.
EX Burst is never bad. She's above curve if you consider the draw off of her. So, I don't know. I mean, a lot of these cards that have EX Burst that get backups haven't really been, like, we're not playing Pain anymore to get Yuna or Riku.
Yeah.
So, are we doing that with Jill, like the target with the card with, like, less relevant targets? Yagrosh in water is a really nice backup you can get. That sees a lot of play in mono water, but is water ice going to play this to get Yagrosh by itself? Probably not. So, it's a neat card that kind of, I think, sits in the binder for now and may find a home eventually.
Well, what about Shinryu Celestia? Clearly a target that can be pulled right off of Emina. It's the same type and everything. And the action ability is fine. Man, they really want me to leave up all my ice backups on your turn. I've got to leave up Kefka so I can dull freeze one of your things. I've got to leave up the Bard so I can dull one of your 2 costs. And now I've got to leave up Celestia to do a 4K bump. Now, 4K is nothing to sneeze at in ice. Like, I do like the idea of, okay, I'm going to Brynhildr your last will. Haha, surprise. He's actually 9,000 power now. That's cool. Hey, he doesn't die to Amaterasu now. Like, that's a cool effect. At the same time, it's just like, I don't know, like, ice also dull freezes. So usually that's how it gets past your cards. Is it just, well, I'm just going to knock them out of the way anyway. So maybe it's not needed, but I guess at its worst, it's a 2-cost backup. So yeah, it's solid.
Searchable with Emina as well, which is nice. Maybe you run one of this, and if Emina's your 4th backup, you just get this, and that's like your payoff for getting to your 5th backup there. Like, that's another potential thing you could do. 4K really is a lot. That basically downgrades all of your opponents' like removal and blocking to you can't do it.
Yeah.
If this card is ever active, there's no dealing with any of my forwards with stuff that does damage.
Yeah.
As cheap as it ends up being. So there's potential there. It is funny, yeah, with Kefka and now this, you've got like so many cards that like want you to have 5 backups. It's interesting. I don't know how much play it'll see.
Yeah, good question. What I'm confident we'll see play is this Squall. If 8 is going to be a thing this set, assuming it uses ice, I don't know, maybe they'll find out that the Fire Lightning version is best, maybe similar to Category 13, but this card just reads insane. He counts all of your characters, and his first effect is a field ability, so you don't get to respond to it, so he can just enter the field, and then boom, he's already in 8,000, and I'm not going to take damage from any of your abilities, assuming, they don't kill him outright. And then just at the beginning of attack phase, play any 8 forward of 4 or less, which is most of the new ones that came out. Like, it reads so, like, again, it's what you want on a card. Like, it just gives this continuous value, this engine. And again, you can't Amaterasu him if he's got the field effect. I mean, you can stop it, but it's not going to kill him. So I'll be amazed if this card doesn't end up being a banger because it reads like he should be a banger.
Yeah, I mean, it's clearly very strong there. Squall is a very contested name.
Yes, which is true.
Between this, there's the light forward pairs very well with Selfie we talked about. The fire forward, if with Selfie, pairs very well. Even stuff like now you could run the 2-cost backup Squall with Emina if you want to go for like kind of Laguna lines.
Yeah,
and stuff like that is another
true.
option you could consider. And like in those situations, how good is this really? You have to really evaluate. Getting 4 or more Category 8 characters really is not particularly easy to do.
Yeah.
It's not like, this isn't Category 14 or 11 or 5 where we have all these standard units. There's one standard unit 8 backup, and it's a pretty irrelevant lightning backup from like Opus 5.
Yeah.
So we can't just like stack light, oh, we're going to put a bunch of backups down to standard units and then we're going to go from there. That's just not a thing. So then are we doing the 6th thing where we're just like, okay, well, sorry, Selfie and Irvine, y'all are getting benched to being backup so we can pad our character count to make Squall not take damage. And if we're not doing that, is this, how much better is this? We've had Crystal Exarch for a while, which is a card like clearly has restrictions. But those restrictions aren't that hard to meet for it to be effective, right? And that card really has never been a metagame contender.
Yeah.
This is probably closer to Golbez than it is to Crystal Exarch, but like there are like instances where this card doesn't read completely insane. It's very good.
Yeah. No, that was a really good analysis. I'm glad you showed like potentially all the flaws with it. And yeah, just being named Squall, man, I don't know. Guess we'll have to see.
Another thing that like comes up is like, if your backups aren't category 8s, he dies to Hecatonchire like everything else in the archetype is going to, because he goes to 10k, but he takes damage from summons, not from abilities.
Yeah, that's true.
So now it's 8k cleave. Now all of a sudden Squall's dead and all of your forwards are dead and you're left with nothing.
Yeah.
And unlike Golbez, when that happened, like Golbez doesn't die to Hecatonchire. It's one of the reasons that card is so good.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of borderline for me just because of that.
Yeah.
It's very good, but
well,
I don't know.
We'll see how
what does the 8 pile look like?
Right, exactly. Well, let's go to our other legend and another full art. This is the signature chase card of the set. This is Sephiroth, and this card is going to live and die by its action ability, because if you take off that entire 4 lines of text, he just says enter the field, discard a card on a 3-cost 7k. Like that's not special. There's plenty of cards that do that. So it's all about his action ability. Clearly, the stonks, pogger play, whatever you want to call it, is they go to combat, they attack with something, you remove Sephiroth from hand, you break that dull forward, and then on your turn, you're bringing him into the field for a discard as well, which is eerily similar to his multi-element version, because it breaks any dull forward and then can discard on attack, except this doesn't immediately put it on the field, and it costs 3 for both. So this definitely wants to be played with backups. Like, I don't think you want to be pitching 2 cards from hand to have to do this. I don't know. Like, I love the art. Obviously, the Gen Kobayashi art is very cool, very unique. And when I first read it, I was super high on it, but I'm actually kind of talking myself down on it the more and more I've thought about it. I have to see how strong that action ability is, because I can see a lot of situations where, I don't know, it just didn't feel as good as I thought it did. And part of that too is, again, forwards are costing cheaper and cheaper these days. If they paid virtually nothing for their forward, or it got value, like, I don't know, how much value are you getting out of breaking it? So I definitely got to see it in action. What about you?
Card read's very good. I think it reminds me, people always joke that Ice Lightning Sephiroth was the best ice summon in the game, but they couldn't play it because it was locked with the lightning card behind it. This is cheaper than that for the effect that is most relevant on that Sephiroth. It's very difficult to interact with this. You can't even Amaterasu it, which is very good. And you don't have to cast it if the best thing to do next turn isn't 3 CP for a discard, then you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
But if it is the best thing to do, then he kind of like, I don't know, refunds 2 CP almost at that point, because you kind of like you redraw him to play him. So it's very powerful. It's very interesting. I think it's probably a 3 of in most ice lists going forward, just as the best summon that you can probably be running most of the time, unless you're like on specific summon synergies.
Yeah, that's a good point. If you think of it like a summon, I like that.
We talked about like way back, I think it was Opus 16 had the Shiva that was 4-cost break a dull forward with like, there's a bonus that no one ever cared about. Like, people considered that card. This is just a strict upgrade on that in every way.
Yeah, true.
So, it seems good.
Fair enough. Next we have Time Mage, which, while I'll never play this card, for a standard unit, this one is surprisingly good. You could potentially get a double dull freeze on entry, again, if you're investing in the standard unit thing. I'm not going to put it in any constructed deck, but I was surprised by how well this read for a standard unit.
Of this cycle, this is probably the best. I mean, especially like, it just wants standard unit backups. Those are the best places for standard. A standard unit backup is better than a named backup.
Mm-hmm.
So this is just asking you to do what you're already wanting to do. So it freezes, locks the forward out, locks the backup out, basically like refunds the 1 CP that it spent to come in. So yeah, it's like decent. I don't think it'll see much play just 'cause I think it's too specific, but it's cool.
All right, shield your eyes, Daniel, because you don't want to look at this thing in the eye. You'll get turned to stone. This is Medusa. Okay, I am the biggest homer for a mono art, but like this one looks like he just drew it in crayon. I don't know. I'm not digging this one.
I love this art. This is kind of cool. I like it.
If this were a monster, I would be all over it. One, I think that would fit it thematically. Two, I think I understand then why they can pay 5 to remove the petrification counters. But it's a forward, so if you kill this, like all the text is still coming from this card, so it doesn't matter.
No.
Is that not accurate?
No. You get a petrification counter.
Oh, it says those effects do not end at the end of the turn.
If it has a petrification counter, it can't attack or block, and 5 CP remove all petrification counters from this card. It gives all the abilities to the card it's petrifying.
And it's not tied to the card. Wow, I'm having old Opus and okay, you talk about it then, because I need to reevaluate for a second. My mistake. I'm glad you corrected me.
I think the card, like, thematically is really cool. It comes into play, it turns the opponent's card to stone, and they can pay basically what you paid for Medusa to unstone their forward as like a tax effect. There's some kind of funny stuff you can do in Ice. Maybe if you're discarding your opponent's hand or freezing their backups, maybe they just never get to unpetrify the card. It's kind of funny, like in concept. It's like permanently unable to do anything. However, does not remove the abilities from the card. If you petrify an Une, your opponent's going to laugh and say, cool, I've got an Une that can't attack or block, but can still get back summoned. It's doing the exact same thing it was already doing. So I don't think that this effect is good enough to really like see play. It's funny, it's interesting. I think it like maybe an aggro deck that like they put down their Warrior of Light as a blocker, and you just say, okay, we can't have that blocking us because we got to get in for damage, and you're never going to be able to pay the 5 to free it. But other than that, I don't really see the seeing play. Yeah,
I still even through that lens, like I don't know if it was I don't know. Yeah. Like you said, Une, even Warrior of Light, okay, he can't block, but he could still ping you. Porum can still do all its action abilities. Like, I like the idea. Like, the concept is cool, but I don't know. Forgive me for misevaluating that, but I didn't catch that last line of text that said...
basically, it makes your opponent cast Medusa to undo the Medusa cast.
Yeah.
Which, like, that's decent, especially, like, Ice Discard, like I said. They might never be able to do that.
Yeah.
I just don't know how many forwards that's really relevant for locking them out of attacking. I mean... I guess it's funny into 13. 13 will never be able to pay the tax on this.
Yeah, true.
You like do this to their, I don't know, their hope, and then the hope never gets to attack for the rest of the game.
Yeah. That's interesting. There's Yuke. We talked about those in the fire ones. Here is Renoa. And 8 has a lot of good Renoas, and this one to me doesn't do any. Like, I'm kind of surprised it costs 3. Like, it's weird that it needs the Squall to have the 2 cost to have the cost reduction, because it doesn't do anything when you play it. And then a 2 discard is nothing to sneeze at all, but you are also paying 1 and losing a backup for it, so that it's not like that's a free cost either. So I don't know. I like the art. The art's fine. And again, what Squall are you running that you want to see the Squall first and then you get the Renoa down for cheaper? So this one's just kind of weird to me. And again, there's so many good Renoas. I just can't imagine that this backup is going to be like the Renoa of choice for the 8 deck.
I mean, to be fair, if you want to run one of the Renoa forwards, you could always break this and then play one of the Renoa forwards.
True.
That's like one thing that's like kind of, I think, slept on with this card a little bit. You could theoretically run the Squall backup, which again we talked about with Emina. You could run Laguna plays potentially, and then this card is now a 2 CP backup that make tap. It kind of becomes Buckaboo, which is a card that actually I think is kind of underplayed still. So I don't hate the card. Again, it's just it's a very difficult name. The Cat 8 Ice Forward Searcher is named Renoa. The Flicker Renoa is fantastic. The old one, the like one that has affinity for 8 characters and then like gets 1 back is named Renoa. Like it's a very good name. But this is not the worst one you could run, and this may not even go there. Maybe this goes in like a Ice Earth, and you use this as like a maybe there's like an Ice Earth Laguna Squall package you run or something like that, and then this also goes in there to help keep their hand size low until you get them to the point where Unalesca locks them out or something.
Yeah.
And then you could use this to proc your own Ignis potentially on a later turn. So there's interesting things this card does. It still does say discard 2 for a pretty relevant rate, so...
Well, sir, that's all the cold I can take, so time to jump out of the freezer and get a light breeze on my face. We're moving on to win. First, we have Alexander, which is our wind summon. You know, I like this card. It's kind of unique. We don't have a whole lot that does this, kind of this, I don't know what you'd even refer to it as, swapping damage, or just like, haha, surprise, it's actually on you. And in theory, you know, one of Wind's quote-unquote struggles still is aggression, right? Usually aggression is going to beat it. And so, technically, this could be seen as an anti-aggression card that, hey, I've got my blocker, and he can actually block much longer than you think because of this. That being said, the Wind package is so complete and has been for so long, and you might hear me say this about a lot of these cards, that, like, are these going to fit in? Wind already has Dryad and Chocobo and Asura. Like, those 3 summons alone are already so solid and consistent that, as cool as this card is, I don't think you're going to see it in any kind of serious Wind decks. Maybe there's some angle I haven't seen for it yet. Like, I think it's a cool card, and obviously if you draw the card, it's even better, but the Wind summons are already so, like, locked in. I just can't see that changing.
I have kind of run the gamut on this card. I first read it and thought, well, this doesn't seem very good. Then I read it and said, well, maybe, like, I see a world where you go, like, maybe like an Izana or something, and then, like, your 13-4 like, opponent, like, has to attack into the Izana to kill you, and you redirect all the damage to the lightning so they don't actually do all the stuff to you.
Mm-hmm.
And then I read the card again, and I realized it's only the next instance of damage, not all the damage for the rest of the turn. And so, like, I was like, well, technically, you could have seen it as like a mirror that just like fades a combat step, right? Like, well, you can't do the damage to this forward as long as your forward over here is alive, so like I could just stop you from attacking me. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, yeah, I think that probably like if your opponent can just goblin this,
yeah,
like,
that's true.
To remove the protection, it's like, okay, you know. It's like, you know, maybe you could cantrip with it if you're trying to get a storm turn off if you're doing that. So I was thinking, like, well, maybe there's like an earth wind control deck or something, or like a fire wind control deck, and I just don't see it. I think that it's just too easy to play around, and there's just better utility, which sucks because wind needs an early game summon. We've like Dryad is fantastic, but for Dryad to be good, you have to get like 3 or 4 backups into play before it starts doing real damage. This is a card, like I said, you could just go Izana, which is basically a free card that then, you know, would function as a blocker that kills something, which is fantastic. You reduce the point of damage and remove it forward.
Yeah.
That's great. But I think there's just too many conditions on this card for it to actually see play, which sucks. It's maybe my least favorite of this entire cycle of summons.
Yeah. Sorry, Alexander. I love you in the games, but this one just probably isn't it. Next, we have Wool. It kind of does generic wind things. You know, breaks a 6 cost or more. That's a very old school style wind effect. A good answer to an early Neo X death if you happen to see it. And just reveal 5. Add one of the wind cards. It's not character, so you can get your summons. Like, I think it's just generically good. It's generically strong. Is it going to replace anything that's already in there? Norstalin, Chocobo Sam, all these cards that can be searched out. It is it's Job Warrior of Light. It's not named Warrior of Light. Otherwise, like the Princess Goblin could get it potentially. Yeah, like this is one of those cards that I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but I also wouldn't be surprised to not see it see play, at least in Wind, just due to, again, it already has such a good package. Maybe it fits in Warrior of Light. It is a Warrior of Light backup. I don't know. How do you see Wall?
I think it'll see a lot of experimentation. The modal utility of get that Neo X death or that Une out of here is pretty nice. My main hangup on this is that Madam M exists, which is kind of the second mode on this with an EX burst.
Yeah.
And Madam M isn't really seeing play in those mono wind decks. You know, and I think she's been slept on as a card. She's probably better than she's she's better than she's getting credit for. But if that's not the case, I don't think an extra reveal 1 for the... I would absolutely take an EX burst if the only mode on this card was the reveal 5 versus reveal 4. And in that situation, then it just kind of falls by the wayside. The job itself is incredible. Warrior of Light on a backup, because Refia control is one of the best things you can be doing in the game. is great, and this is not a contested name in that deck. I like the only other options are like the old Earth Legend, and then like the light forward that like reveals 5 and adds a Warrior of Light, and then when it dies, it resurrects something.
Mm-hmm.
But like that one's awkward because it's a light card, and you're already competing with light cards because it's Warriors of Light. There's a lot of them. So it'll see play, which is all you can ask for from a common.
Yep. Speaking of commons, we have Epiornis. If this came out in like Opus 6, I would actually like this card a lot. It kind of gives me some old school Chocobo vibes that, it just kind of wants to sneak under stuff. And I know you're a lot higher on these monsters than I am because you think they're Kadaj, even though I don't personally think that. But I'm curious to know how you feel about this one because, I don't know, just the all it does is it can't be blocked. So it doesn't do extra damage. It doesn't lock down a forward like the Ice Bomb. So this to me seems like one of the weaker ones, even though power-wise it technically has more power than some of the others. So not a fan of this bird. How do you see it?
They did wind dirty this set. Every single one of the cycles in this set of wind is worse than every other cycle in the set, I'm pretty sure. This card just doesn't do anything. And then so you have to think like what's the situation you would play this, and it's like really isn't one. I mean, if you would like tutor for this in the realm deck, you would tutor for the lightning guy instead.
Yeah.
Not being blocked by 4 or more or 3 or more, just you might as well not have that text on there because the only time your opponent blocks this is I don't know. I don't see the use case for this one.
Well, and back in the day, there was more expensive forwards, so like not being blocked by 4 was a little more relevant. But nowadays, there's so many 2 costs, there's 1 cost. Like there's so much cheap stuff. This thing can get blocked by so many things.
I feel like at that point, like you could run any other number of good cards, and you don't have to resort to this.
Yeah. Next, we have Enkidu, who is a warrior, so perhaps relevant for, what's his name? Not Axstar. Tyvis type decks or anything that cares about a warrior. Obviously works with Gilgamesh as well. I have to admit, like, I saw the full art and I saw this text. I was like, oh, okay. And then as I read it, I was like, does this really do anything? I mean, it becomes free, right? That essentially you tap 3 backups, you play him, and then he's just there. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I mean, I don't know, old Opus 1 Pain was free and also gave you the card back in hand. Like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Like, I don't think he's going to go in mono win because they're kind of just past the days of bodies that just pay for themselves and do nothing else. Otherwise, we'd be running the old Bart's Vada, all that stuff. So you probably use him with Gilgamesh. And maybe in Gilgamesh, just having a free forward is worth it, or especially since that Gilgamesh wants to, like, pay for extra for his effect, so maybe that's worth it there. Other than that, I just, I don't know. I don't feel like I've ever been impressed with any of the Enkidu cards, and this one doesn't change my mind.
So it actually is kind of neat in Tyvis in a way, because it kind of allows Tyvis to refund basically all of his costs, because Tyvis costs 5, but draws a card on entry, and then you could play Enkidu and then tap, like, say you tap 3 backups and pitch to play Tyvis. You get Enkidu, you play Enkidu for free, you untap your backups, Tyvis kind of becomes a free forward that gets another forward.
Yeah.
Then maybe you cast the Mog or something that's in your hand or whatever else. Like, that's actually kind of neat. In Mono Wind, no. We have Cerberus. Cerberus is just better. This gets characters, I guess. No, it just activates backups. It's not even activate characters. So there's no case for it there. So the other case is with the Gilgamesh. Probably intended for the Gilgamesh in this set, which we can maybe talk a bit more about when we get to that Gilgamesh, but like it ends up like turning that Gilgamesh, because if you're playing the Gilgamesh, you're paying for the effect anyway, and this gives kind of a pseudo reduction on Gilgamesh's effect by being 2 CP as opposed to being 5, which is nice. And in that situation, it's kind of cool. You don't have to play this in a win deck at that point. You just need to run like 1 or 2 copies of this and just get it in the break zone at some point over the course of a game before you get to 5 backups and play Gilgamesh, which is cool.
Yeah. Well, you want activation of characters? I can give you that. Check out this new Kane full art. I have to admit, on first read through, I'm not very impressed with this card, and I don't know what it is about Kane, man. Like, he has never gotten a card that I'm like, that's it. That is the Kane we've been waiting for. That is the guy. Every Kane is always like, oh, I don't know about this guy. Like, and I get it. Maybe that's the theme they keep. Get it? Because like he betrays you in the game, so he's always got some downside. Like, not that there's anything inherently wrong with this card. Haste and First Strike are 2 very good keywords. Reactivating 2 characters is also nothing to sneeze at. He's just a 6K, which yes, he does have First Strike, but without something to buff that, like even at damage 3, he just becomes 7. I don't know. Again, I don't think there's anything wrong with this card, but it also doesn't excite me. Am I putting this in over the other Canes and Dragoons? Like, again, I'm still waiting, I guess, for that. I'm still waiting for that Cane to be like, I have come at last. I will define Dragoons. Here I am. Behold my power. What do you think?
You're a little harsh on some Canes. I think the old Crystal one is still a pretty decent card in Dragoon, especially given that, like, if you're in Wind for the extra backups anyway, half of them generate crystals anyway.
If you have the Crystal, he's good.
This card's fine. It reminds me a little bit of Yuri in a way, in that, like, you can attack with him and then activate himself, which kind of makes him like a 3 CP haste first strike brave forward that also activates a backup when it attacks, which is like not bad for stalling out like weenie aggression. Like if your opponent's just like throwing a bunch of Vikings at you, none of them are going to get over this. So that's kind of nice. Maybe there's some stuff that really like buffs him up to be like a 10k, at which point he becomes really, really obnoxious probably. In the same way that like there are decks that just can't out that Yuri. If you like attack with Yuri and then Yuri activate himself, your opponent can't choose him sometimes. They just can't get over him. That's how L3 used to stall out 13 somehow. Was they would use that Yuri to kind of slow them down and make it harder for them to attack into them. So maybe there's a place for him here with that, but generally I think. Which, to be fair, if you're thinking this much about a common, it's a better common than most are going to be. So
I guess
I'll give it the credit there. The art's fantastic too. This card looks really cool.
I do like the full art. Well, let's give you some more comments. This is Ranger, who text-wise almost seems more like he should be in fire since he just does straight 5,000 damage. Wind generally isn't wanting to break its own backups. It wants to be on nice and 5. It certainly has easier ways to break monsters. Individual ping, I don't think it's ever really been lacking for. So, yeah, I feel like this one's pretty forgettable.
I said every single one of these cycles, this is a part of another cycle, and it's by far the worst one. Well, why does it have to choose a 2 or less for it? Not only that, it doesn't fit Wind's identity at all.
Nope.
Wind's like, okay, monster breaking, that's a Wind effect. Small ping, but like small ping as a cleave is a Wind thing.
Yeah.
Targeting a small thing only and doing that doesn't fit Wind. This is just a weird card. It's like they just like don't. They really just don't feel like they know what they're doing with Wind right now, to be quite honest. I don't think I blame them. I think Wind is probably, with the color pie that they've given it, by far the hardest element to design new cards for.
Yeah.
But this isn't really helping or moving the needle in any way.
Yeah.
So.
No, and you saw with the wall, too, a lot of earlier Wind stuff was actually always about targeting big bodies. And if you look at old Wind cards, it's always 5 or more, 4 or more, 6 or more. So, yeah, the 2 or more restriction really does not fit.
Not only
this
that,
at all.
most of these cycle don't break themselves for their action ability like this. Like, I could see this being like, choose a forward of 6 or more, deal it 3k damage or something, right? You know, do a small ping, or like, do damage, do 3k damage to all your opponent's forwards of 5 or more or something.
Yep.
It's like, it still wouldn't see play, but it would feel more like a Wind card. This feels like a lightning and a fire card, like, randomly, that has a monster break tacked onto it. It's just a weird card. We're giving it more credit than it needs.
Yeah. Clavat, that was part of the cycle we talked about earlier. Here is Sid, Brave Exvius. Not as cool as his Amano art from the card back in Opus 10. And I don't know, again, I like this character, but the more I read the effects, it just seems so tame by some of the other things we have. So you have to wait till the start of attack phase, and then so he can still be modded, but he can be modded in the attack phase, so you can't like replay another one if you had a spare. Choose 2 characters, activate them, and that's fine. All forwards control can't be chosen by summons is also okay, but again, because you have to wait till attack phase, if they really want to hit you with a summon, they'll just hit you on the stack of it when you go to attack phase. Like, I don't see how this is going to catch someone by surprise. Like, maybe if it was on entry, I don't know, because then you could maybe play a second one. But yeah, both those effects just seem very tame. Clearly, he's got the revival effect too, which isn't terrible. But then again, he's not going to trigger till attack phase again. Yeah, he just, for having such a limited window for what he does, and I normally like the beginning of attack phase triggers, it feels very tame.
I mean, we have a lot of versions of this card. There's nothing wrong with it. I do wish, like, when he came back alive, he would come back active.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
You know, it wouldn't be too good. I trust you, Hobby Japan. Like, he could come back active, and if you're willing to pay 3 CP for him over and over again, they're going to bleed you out probably faster than you're going to, win the game by reviving this thing over and over again. But, like, the effect is fine, I don't think the choosing by summons matters at all. It just seems like they wanted to tack another Wind effect on, and Wind's kind of like got a weird evasion theme going on. But activating 2 characters, that's what Leo does. This just does kind of the Leo thing generically, and
Yeah.
also like I just feel like it loses out to the no, not Leo. Oh God, what's his name? Yuri.
Oh, Yuri, yeah.
Yeah, he just does the Yuri thing, but like the Yuri thing worse than Yuri does, which is not a great place to be.
Yeah. All right, I get to ask this question again, Ghoul. Dragoons, is this the card that makes Dragoons over the top? So this is Sasha. She's another Dragoon, a unique named one. So again, you can't ever get worse by having more options. It's just more options. That being said, again, she just doesn't really do anything. Yes, if you're playing her in Dragoons, she only is a 2-cost 8K, and that's not bad. There's nothing wrong with that. And if, let's say, you've got Barbariccia on the field, and so she has haste, you could immediately use her ping. It's only 4K, and she has to dull herself, which normally Dragoons are wanting to go in there and just, like, stab you to death, so I don't know. It doesn't really feel like it fits that. Maybe it's like that's more of the wind effect. So, again, it's fine. It's like it feels very tame, kind of based on what the game is at. But it's fine. There's not really anything wrong with it.
I mean, that deck kind of wants more Wind Dragoons that aren't named Kane or a backup. She could slot there potentially. It's just nice to have a Wind card that you could theoretically cast to buff like a Freya, like Cherry Blossom or something.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll give her credit there, but I think for the most part this is just designed for draft.
Yeah. Next we have Chelinka, definitely one of the less impressive Chelinkas we've gotten. I kind of wish, it kind of gives me vibes of the Opus 20 Celis, where that Celis, it existed to give this other card haste, but the Celis also on its own could dull your board. So like it was clearly meant to be paired with Lock, but didn't have to be paired with Lock. So it kind of bums me out that this only exists to give Yuri haste. And I was like, well, what Yuri are you even wanting to give haste? Probably the old, can't choose one, the wind one. I know we did get a new Yuri too that we'll talk about later in the limit breaks. But I don't recall that having like an on attack effect. So yeah, I mean, it's fine if you really need to give a Yuri haste. This is the card for you. I'm not really sure I'm supposed to use it.
It's kind of unfortunate she doesn't give herself haste too, because you could theoretically run the one that like you discard to play a Chelinka from deck.
Yeah.
And like if that was the case and she gave herself and that Yuri haste, you could party attack with it, and then that's like got a trigger to activate all your characters, or I think it's break a forward.
Yeah, or a monster.
It's like really cool.
Yeah.
Like that would have been like a really sick combo, right? To potentially go for, which would have given her a use case. As she is, like, yes, she still gives that Yuri haste, maybe, and like that's kind of cool, but like you'd have to have another forward on the field for him to party attack with, which is a little annoying to get that trigger off.
Yeah.
That's probably like the best home for her. Like she's fine with the limit break Yuri. I just don't imagine people play this as a brick in your deck for the limit break. Like you'll play the limit break regardless, I think, just because might as well. But I imagine it's one of the first like low rarity limit breaks to get swapped out once we get better options in the future.
Yep.
So and once that happens, this Chelinka doesn't have a lot of use.
Exactly. Hey, well said, sir. Let's check out our first Wind Legend. This is Mr. Dorgan, some beautiful art by Miki Yamashita. Hopefully I said that correctly. And yeah, he has 3 good effects, and if you've cast 3 or more cards, which is very easy to do in Wind, you're going to get 2 of them, and they're all just fine. He can break a monster, cool. He removes it from the game and can remove a 5-cost. Again, technically an easy way to deal with Neo-X Death or an Une or, a Chaos, whatever comes to mind, Man in Black. And then you can choose 2 cards removed from the break zone. I kind of actually think that's his most unique effect. Wind does have a few cards that remove from the break zone, but it's not overly something Wind does. Yes, again, this is one of those cards. Sorry to keep repeating myself, folks, but like, I like the card. There's nothing wrong with this, but you're not going to put this in mono wind just because you don't need to. Like the package is so complete. What is he doing for you that other cards aren't already doing, and they're cheaper? This guy you have to pay a full 4 for. So I like him. I like the art. I'll be shocked if this shows up in any mono wind list. Maybe he goes somewhere else because he doesn't have to be in mono wind. He is cast oriented, but I don't know. What do you think of Dorgan?
I keep looking at him, and like, there's definitely a use case. Like, all the text on the card is good. I mean, even like remove monster from the game means they can't get it back. The big thing there is like, if you remove Atomos from the game, they can't get the Atomos back with like an Azura and then replay it, which is a big deal. Removing Man in Black from the game. Man in Black and Une and all those cards are a lot of times paired with something like Kusith to get them back and repeat the effect. It removes Griever from the game so it can't float into a witch, right?
Yeah.
Those are all really, really cool things. It's just like, the synergy in wind tends to go towards low curve forwards. And then if you're not doing that, then you need to be enabling those low curve forwards to do their things. And Dorgan doesn't enable anything. He's meant to be kind of a payoff. But we already have a lot of those payoffs. You know, compare this to Vaughn or the little fairy girl, Nini. Those are cards that are like, still get to 3 casts, but they're not very difficult to get to that point to be useful. And when you do cast them, Vaughn is usually 1 CP or free. Nini cost 1 for a scry and a draw.
Mm-hmm.
This is 4 CP for a draw and then maybe removal. Even in wind, you probably have to like do some shenanigans after that to get your backups back up to get to that 7 for elusive after this, right? Yeah. So then it's like, well, what does play him? I don't hate him in like an Earthwind shell, because then you have Kryl to get him back from the break zone potentially, which is kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can maybe run him as a 1 of there, and then like that's kind of nice. Tilica, this guy costing 3 feels a lot better than him costing 4.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And then also, I think Earthwind is a lot less reliant on getting to that 7 cast Luso because of cards like Noctis and that whole package, the retainer package.
Yeah.
So maybe he slots in there. You know, fits better with Kusith if you're not trying, because you recur him with that as opposed to like Azura, which can't get him back if you're in mono win. Again, there's just nothing wrong with them. He just doesn't really seem to have a home.
You know what's funny is, as I thought about this card, I kept, for some reason, and maybe it's just because I wanted, I kept thinking it was at the start of attack phase like Sid, and that it repeated. And I think it might have been a little more interesting there if every start of attack you got to choose one of these. But every time I remember, oh yeah, it's just one time. Like, yeah, you get a one-time 2-card removal and then draw. Like, I don't know, that feels very much of a letdown.
I mean, that would have been really cool, but it probably would have been too good. Like, that's just a power crept Lakshmi at that point.
Yeah,
right?
well, and maybe then you just change it, so instead of like getting multiple with cast, maybe it's just at the start of attack phase. You get 1 if you do 3. I don't know.
I can see that.
All right, shall we move on to our next one?
Yeah.
A hero with some lovely full art. This is Nanamigo, and of course I immediately hate this card because it's a robber, and it takes your stuff and says, oh, hey, you remember my buddy Zidane? And you know somebody's going to build the Zidane Nanamigo deck. Well, you know, I'm just going to play all your cards. Actually, that's where I think this thing's home is, if it has one, is Fire Wind. Play Lonnie, play Zidane, play Nanamigo, and just take everything your opponent has and watch them rage. Very salt-inducing effect. However, is it actually good? I kind of tend to lean towards the Matisky school of thought, where he says, in wins specifically, you have such good cards, what you can do is just going to be better than what your opponent can do. And so it targets a forward of 2 or less in your opponent's break zone. Very common nowadays, but you probably will run into situations where you're like, oh, this doesn't have anything to do. Like, unlike Zidane or Lonnie, which at its worst will always get you something, you might have moments where there is no someone to pick. There is no forward to pick. So while I hate this card on principle, because I just hate the whole thief thing they love pushing in this game, how good is it really? That I don't know, but I am going to try it in Firewind and probably hate myself for it.
I like the concept. This kind of, one of Wynn's things they try to keep pushing is like this weird little mill thing where you mill your opponent into stuff. And if that's the case, then it's nice that they're putting payoffs for that. Like, you say like, oh, well, they're playing stuff from my deck, but like, if they're actively forcing you to do things with something like a Beldat Warp or something, you know, they have some agency in making sure there are cards in the break zone for them to steal, which is cool. The biggest thing is just like the rate on this is not great. You know, a 4 CP revive a 2 cost, that's not anything special.
Yeah.
Steal a 3 cost summon, but summons are very conditional on what they're hitting. I mean, sure, it's pretty funny to like do this, hit your opponent's chocobo, bounce her back to hand.
Yeah.
But what are you accomplishing with that? Right?
Right.
You're just getting, I guess you get 2 casts, but like, is that really worth a slot in your deck? And then, you know, you're gonna hit matchups where there aren't summons, so you have to steal forwards. You're not casting the forwards, so you can't play this in a cast deck because it's not guaranteed to be 2 casts. I think this is a really fun, cool card that just, I don't see where you would play it.
Yep.
Oh, especially don't see where you'd play it over something like Beldat.
Who knew that Category 5 had such gorgeous mono art, man? Every time I see a Bart's, that one with him and Lena on the moon, like, wow. Just
there are, I was looking because there's a spoiler, there's a Lena later in this set.
Yeah.
Lena has like 6 cards in the game, and 4 of them are on mono art, and all of them are stunning.
Yeah. He just, I mean, he knocks it out of the park with this stuff. So, is this card any good? My first impression of it was no, this card's terrible. Its only effect, because like specials are like, whatever, it's a special, who cares? Its only effect is this action ability that, okay, protection is cool, and it removes cards from the break zone, so it's like a dredge effect, a little mini Stern Leonis, Moshri effect, right? But all it does is prevent him from getting picked by abilities. He's just a 5-cost body. So like, again, I just dismissed it like, well, who cares? Like, that's not worth protecting. And again, it's a special. Specials are just so rare in this game. How often do they come up? Well, there is something fun you can do, and I'm not going to tell you what it is. I'm going to let Ghoul, because he's the one who told me about this idea, and I thought, hey, that's pretty good. So, based on this special, Ghoul, tell us what's cool about Bart's.
This turns Sarah into Sildra, which is the weirdest sentence to say out loud. But one of the reasons that Sildra was so good and eventually got banned is you could play Sildra in a deck, run as few as 8 backups, and consistently hit all the backups you could ever need.
Mm-hmm.
There's a Sarah FFL that's a Warrior of Light that searches 2 Warriors of Light. And there's no restrictions on that whatsoever for some reason. They don't have to be different names, different costs, different elements. It just gets 2 Warrior of Light forwards. Which previously, it's funny, when the card was like been around for ages, and it's been like, why would we get 2 Warrior of Light forwards? Like 6 EP is like fine, but it's so expensive, and rips cards out of your deck. Well, this gets Bart's and a Bart special, and then that Bart special can get Kryl, and that Kryl can get back Bart's for another Bart special, and all of a sudden now you're on 3 backups, all of different Warrior of Light colors, and all this cascaded from a single card in hand. Obviously with some CP on the side, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing that's like really big this set is 3 CP forwards have a massive target on their head. If you have a value engine piece that your opponent has to kill, which this Bart says they have to kill this card, right? If otherwise I'm just going to keep, every time I draw a Bart, it's the best Warrior of Light still in my deck.
Yeah.
every single time. But that's basically what that special says. I didn't process that. I was like, well, why doesn't it give you a discount on the card you're playing or anything like that? Like,
yeah, same.
Really, but it turns that Bart's into any other card, which becomes really powerful. There's no way to search these Warrior of Light backups. There are Refia control lists in Japan that are topping tourneys on 24 backups to try to get the 4 Warrior of Light backups so that Refia has as much action as possible when she comes into play. This card just does away with that.
Yeah. Now,
instead of running all those backups, you can run forwards instead, as long as you have Bartz's to consistently special with. It's and then the text on it says it can't be chosen is like, it's like not amazing, like I don't want to remove this from a break zone, but that's really threatening, right? I'm not going to invest like this big kill spell into it, let's get the Barts out of here because otherwise you're going to lose the game if you have the 3 Warriors of Light in the break zone.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden now that Cloud LB kind of sits in your limit break deck and like goes, I can't deal with this. What do you want me to do?
Yeah. I can't deal with this. No, that special chain, especially with the Sarah specifically searching 2 Barts, because that's always my issue with special abilities, right? Is that it's hard to line them up without running a bunch of extra copies, and then you're hurting the consistency of your deck. But if you can turn one Sarah into Barts, into the Kryl, into whatever you would get next, Lena or Fire Lunith, maybe, I don't know, whatever you prefer, like... Yeah, that alone, you really sold me on it. So I'm hoping for good things from it. It gets even
better from there when you start looking at what and it's funny because the card that I think has seen literally 0 play, the Light Barge from Opus 16 is incredible with this card.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Because it's a special that you can do to then just pitch a dead backup into later to try to dig for action later.
Yeah.
This card went from being. This card on reveal, I thought was one of the worst cards. Like, why is this a hero other than the Amano art?
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh. And everything I've seen on this, like, this is maybe what the deck I'm most excited to brew with right now.
Yeah. Show us the sauce, everyone. Probably not with this Geomancer, though. He's a standard unit. He's fine. He's just kind of chaff. Nothing special. Anything to say about him?
It's the worst of the cycle again.
Yeah. There you go.
I don't know how. Like, they keep doing it.
So, what would you say if I had another 2-cost Hope Ravager Lassie to show you for Category 13? That fits so well in a 13 deck, but he's wind, so clearly good in title. But man, and obviously we already have a very good hope. That's the lightning hope. So I like the card. I genuinely do. I just, where does this go other than obviously in a title deck? Like even anyone who does a 13 variant, because I've seen an Earth Fire variant, I've seen the Fire Ice variant. I don't think I've seen any variant using Wind. So cool card. I don't know where to use it.
I think this card's really good, actually. I've been on the secret Fire Wind 13 is actually viable and people should maybe experiment with it. And that was with like way worse hopes than this. But Hope has a very, very good EX backup searcher in Nora.
True.
13 in Wind has a standard unit forward that when it goes to the break zone adds back a 2 cost. So a lot of times what will end up happening in 13 is your opponent will board wipe you with like a Hecaton Cheer. And then you have to like draw for 3 turns to recover, at which point you usually kill them because you top deck the Ashtola or something, right? But if instead when they board wipe you just get to add back Lightning, that's pretty insane. And that card gets really nuts with like Fang to reduce the cost on it. You have the old Legend Null that is really funny with Lightning because it can attack and then just peace out.
Yeah.
Just buff the rest of the field and not give them a chance at any X burst before you get the draw. I think this card potentially shifts, and I also think that with Cloud and Victoria especially, I think 13 has to shift how they play. They can't just do Hope Vanille Pass anymore without the risk of just getting their blown out by a limit break. And sure, forcing a limit break is good, but that's just buying the opponent time. They're trading up into you when they're doing that.
Yeah.
I think there's the potential for just a 0 cost forward with a not irrelevant special.
Yeah.
That has an EX backup searcher in a deck that wants to have 13 characters in it in general. So you have like what? Vanille. You probably run 6 Vanilles because the special in that card is completely broken. You have the three Hopes, 2 Noras, 3 Fangs. Like we're getting to very close to that, 30, 25, 30 density of category 13 forwards, at which point like you're not going to whiff anymore. So I think this card is very good. This card scares me, actually. And then you could play Firewinds that ain't on color in a deck that actually would want to play that card because there's only so many answers people have to 13. So ripping them out just wins the game.
Maybe this is the sauce then. The Steven sauce. He can let me know if he checks it out. All right. You sold me on it. I mean, again, I didn't dislike it. I just didn't know where it went. So Firewind 13. I'll give it a try. This is Daniel's plan. Now he's going to beat it all the time. Be like, well, I guess 13's dead. What are you going to do?
Yes, that's my goal, is to make 13 as bad as possible. Actually, my goal is to make it as good as possible so they ban Lightning sooner. But
that's fair.
That's neither here nor there.
Next, we have Helena Leonis, perhaps Stern Leonis' mother. I don't know the lore of Brave Exvius very well. Maybe it's his sister. I don't know.
That is the lore. It's the mom.
Okay. So, this effect actually scared me a little when I first read it. I was like, oh my god, like a win thing, and they can cast more stuff, and then it gets reduced by 2. But then I started thinking about it. You obviously have to have crystals. Then you can only cast it this turn, which again, compared to something like Zidane, where it just says, nah, permanently I've got this resource out in space. So the more I thought about it, like, I don't know how realistic this is, and her being able to stick around for you to do it over and over and over again. Obviously, if you can, you're probably just beyond winning that game. But the more I thought about it, the more I wondered if it was a gimmick. But I don't know. I've been surprised by cards like this in the past. So I'm going to say it won't see much play, but I also wouldn't be surprised if this one, if I'm wrong about this one, and actually, you missed the secret sauce on it.
I mean, this is one of the best values for a single crystal in the game, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's effectively a draw and 2 CP as long as you can cast the card you're removing from the game.
Yeah.
It can become 0 if you remove from game Azura, you can just cast it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a lot of potential here. The biggest question is, who was playing crystals in Wind?
Exactly.
And I'm trying to think like what you could like. We're not running like Charlotta to do that in like a mono Windstorm deck. So you'd have to run like one of the Dragoon backups to get this. And maybe it's worth it because that really is a good effect. But then you can't recur her, so when she dies, which she's going to because she has to. So then she has to go somewhere else, and she's decent in any like Wind deck that is like any deck that's touching Wind that has crystals in it. Just don't know what that is.
I know my luck too is I would hit a backup or monster that I already have on the field and be like, all right, cool, I can't do anything.
I mean, it's 2 cards, so you're doubling your chances. It's not even like a 1 card.
Yeah, that is true.
So the effect, like I said, that's a 4 CP value out of your crystal. Like, in theory, we talk about crystals being worth about a CP and a half.
Mm-hmm.
I think Cyan has probably lowered that bar to being 1 CP per, but that's 1 CP off of a Cyan crystal that you're turning into 4 CP into Helena Leonis. Maybe she goes in like a Giga Wall deck then. Like, you just like incidentally get a backup at some point and you just do this to get into your next thing. I don't know. But then, like, she has to stick, and when you're doing that, you're already kind of ahead.
Yeah.
It's very, very strange. The card is clearly very strong. It's just where. I think Giga Wall is probably the most likely home because the deck's already on crystals anyway.
Yeah. Next, we have Lillicet, who has terrible name clash for a dancer. I was excited to see a new dancer card. I was like, oh, okay, well, you can't use this in the other dancers because you're giving up, like, the best thing in the dancers. Beyond that, like, I mean, if you got a huge board, like, obviously it's a nice it's a nice hit, but I don't know. It just seems pretty underwhelming to me. I think there's better things to be doing.
It's just Chokomog on a 3 CP backup.
Yeah.
I'd be a little more interested if it said 2, just because, like, Mono Wind is really struggling for good EX bursts. But even here, it's like only a good EX burst if you've already set up.
Yeah.
And they're really looking for the EX burst to just, like, stop you from taking damage, and this isn't going to do that early. So I just, this one's just a swing and a miss.
Yeah. Next, we have Redis, a beautiful, big, bushy mustache and beard combination, and obviously Sky Pirates hasn't been seen in a moment, even though I think that's a deck that's one of I think people are sleeping on kind of decks. And so just another free, unique name in there is very good. Old Redis was pretty bad, so it's nice to have that. And at first I kind of just left it at that. Okay, it's another free name, that's nice. Another count for Pinello, another count for Balthier, that's great. However, his effect that they can't be chosen by summons, again, I feel like summons are a little less relevant than abilities, but then I did remember Pinello has the ability to prevent chosen by abilities. And so now, other than Redis himself, you essentially can say basically some target on your board cannot be chosen by summons or abilities. So that alone is enough to bring the deck back. I don't know. It's the only real piece they got. Maybe he's meant to go actually in the last Sky Pirates. I'm still thinking Opus 14 Vaughn, but maybe he's meant with like the previous Win Balthier and Vaughn that we got. So yeah, I think he's got hidden potential, but they also only put him at a rare, so maybe not. I don't know. I have my fingers crossed for him, but yeah, I don't know. I'm like now talking myself out of it. I don't know. Why do I feel so weird about this card?
I mean, Sky Pirates in general were just kind of in a weird place. I think the cast Sky Pirates thing they were angling for last set just kind of isn't a home for this, really. You know, you get to what, Balthier or Vaughn, maybe Pinello. I guess you could have like kites in your backups, but like, is he really moving the needle at that point?
Yeah,
not really. So you probably want to go with like the old school Opus 14 Vaughn, Opus 15 Pinello, and all of that. Actually, I played a lot of that last set in Opus 20 just because I thought Shinryu ended up being like the best thing that deck could ever want.
Yeah.
Because what ends up happening with Sky Pirate games, you get to the point of inevitability, and you just need a CP sync that wins you the game, and Shinryu kind of does that. Like,
yeah.
If you have 8 million CP and 20,000 cards in hand, you could just Shinryu special away and just kill the opponent. That said, that deck's got actually a big problem dealing with Shinryu.
Yeah, also true.
You just incidentally go to a large forward count in that deck, as it turns out. Almost every single line you have is like 2 or 3 backups and then 3 forwards. So if your opponent ever ends up on an empty field, then end up getting wiped by Shinryu, and there's not that much you can do about that other than like kitesing out. But
right.
There's only so many times you can do that over the course of a game, and it still feels bad when it happens.
Yeah.
When you get your final setup, you get your Exodia board, and your opponent goes 2 CP Shinryu. I'm gonna just wipe your field without choosing anything.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't get the Vaughn refund.
So he's definitely solid there. It's also nice, like, if they do have a summon that's a kill spell, they have to target him. Maybe you can then use the Vine plus the Balthier to buff him out of the way. That could be really cool.
Yeah.
so he doesn't die to that if like that's a big deal. I almost wish it was like not affected by summon, so they could like prevent Amaterasu on Vaughn somehow. Like,
Yeah,
that'd
that'd
be
be crazy.
But like that's not a line of text that we've printed on cards in Final Fantasy at all. It's like unaffected by summons. And even there, they might rule it's like, well, it's not affecting the character; it's affecting the auto ability. So the auto ability is canceled.
Yeah,
still, so
that's fair.
I don't know how they would rule a card like that, but maybe they just print. Also, your card name, your job name, Sky Pirates are immune to Levitarasu and Amaterasu.
Exactly.
Get wrecked,
Yeah.
nerd.
Get wrecked, nerds. Well, sir. Oh, go ahead.
I would say no. I mean, it's a cool card. It's interesting. I really like that archetype. I don't see it. When I talked about Turks with Cisne, Sky Pirates have the same issue that like those old Lightning Starter deck Turks have of like being a critical mass deck in Opus 22.
Yeah.
And critical mass just doesn't happen consistently enough anymore to be worth going for.
Yeah. No, that's good insight. Well, that's about all we've got here for wind, folks. We're going to wrap up here. We did the first 3 elements. Thank you again for Daniel joining me. Don't go anywhere. Shortly on the channel, look for part 2. We'll have a little link probably popping up here. But yeah, look for part 2, and we'll see you with Earth, Lightning, and Water. Check out his information in the description below. And until next time, take care.